The Galactic Military Academy sat on a moon that orbited a dying star. Students came from every corner of known space to study war. They learned strategy. They learned tactics. They learned how to win battles that would decide the fate of worlds. Instructor Vethoran had taught at the academy for 40 years. He was a Calaxian, a species with 4 arms and 6 eyes. His body was covered in hard plates that could stop a blade. He had fought in 3 wars and won medals that hung in the Academy's Hall of Heroes. Today, he looked at his newest class with all 6 eyes. 32 students sat in a large teaching room. They came from 19 different species. Some had scales. Some had shells. Some had no solid form at all. They were the best young minds their worlds had to offer. And in the back row, sitting alone, was the human. Her name was Sarah Chen. She was small compared to most of the other students. Her skin was soft and brown. She had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons of any kind. She looked weak. She looked fragile. She looked like something that should not survive in a galaxy full of predators. The other students had heard stories about humans. Their teachers had warned them. Humans came from a death world, a planet so dangerous that most species would die there in hours. Humans were persistent predators. They chased their prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. They had conquered their planet not through strength, but through stubborn refusal to quit. But looking at Sarah Chun, most of the students found it hard to believe these stories. She was just so small. Today, we begin the fortress assault simulation, Instructor Vethoran announced. His voice was made of clicks and hisses, but the translator in the room turned his words into sounds everyone could understand. This is the most important test you will face this year. The students shifted in their seats. Everyone knew about the fortress simulation. It was famous. It was feared. The simulation used an artificial intelligence that could think faster than any living mind. It would defend the fortress against whatever attack the student designed. No one ever won easily. Most students lost badly. The rules are simple, Vethoran continued. You will command an attacking army. The AI will defend the fortress. Your resources will be equal to the defender's resources. You win by capturing the central command building. You lose if your army is destroyed or if you surrender. A Valkyrie student raised 1 crystalline arm. The Valkyrie were beings made of living crystal. They were beautiful and cold. What is the current record, instructor? 37 hours. Held by a Krix hive mind who sacrificed 82% of their forces to achieve victory. Vethoran's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. Most students take much longer. Many never win at all. One by one, students walked to the central console to receive their assignments. The simulation would pull a fortress from their species' history. They would face a defensive position their ancestors had once built or faced. The Valkyrie student was assigned a siege from the Crystal Wars, when his people had fought over mineral deposits. He walked back to his seat looking worried. A Morphean was assigned an underwater assault. The Morpheans were beings made of living liquid. They could change their shape at will. The student rippled with nervousness. A Krix received a hive assault scenario. The Krix were giant insects who thought as one mind spread across many bodies. Even they seemed afraid. Then it was Sarah Chun's turn. She walked to the console with quiet steps. She did not look nervous. She did not look scared. She just looked curious, like a student waiting to see an interesting problem. The I-ass voice filled the room. It had no emotion. It was simply a machine doing its job. Human student detected. Accessing Earth historical database. Selecting siege scenario. Wait, Sarah said. The room went silent. No one interrupted the simulation AI. It was not done. It was not allowed. But this small human had just stopped the most advanced military training system in the galaxy with a single word. "Which era?" she asked. Instructor Vethorin leaned forward. All 6 of his eyes focused on her. "Explain your question, student." "Which era of human siege warfare?" Sarah said. She spoke like this was a normal question. Like she was asking about the weather or what was for lunch. Because medieval is very different from ancient. Modern is completely different from both. And if you're including theoretical scenarios based on current military thinking, I need to know the specific decade. The AI was quiet for a moment. This was strange. The AI was never quiet. It processed information faster than thought. "Clarification needed," the AI finally said. "Human historical database contains unusual amount of siege warfare information. Please specify preferred time period." "How many options are there?" the Velkari student asked. His crystal body was humming with confusion. The AI answered in its flat, emotionless voice. Human siege warfare records span approximately 11,000 years of continuous tactical development. Database contains 847 distinct approaches to fortress assault. Records include 12,847 major siege battles. Estimated total fortress attacks exceed 2.3 million documented events. The teaching room was completely still. No one moved. No one spoke. Subcategories include, the AI continued, Sumerian city attacks, Egyptian fortress methods, Assyrian psychological tactics, Greek siege science, Roman siege engineering, Chinese crossbow doctrine, Mongol terror methods, medieval European castle warfare, Ottoman Ken revolution, scientific fortification period, American trench warfare, World War I attrition methods, World War II urban assault tactics, Cold War bunker destruction theory, and 21st century city fighting doctrine. 11,000 years? The Morphean student's body was shaking so hard it was losing its shape. 11,000 years of siege warfare? Sarah shrugged. It was a small movement, very human. We really like building walls. And we really like knocking them down. Instructor Vethorin stared at the human. He had taught students from species that communicated through light. He had taught students from civilizations older than some stars. He had never seen anything like this. 11,000 years of learning how to destroy fortresses. Not occasional conflicts. Not rare wars. Continuous, unbroken study of destruction. Generation after generation, building better walls, then building better ways to break them. The AI requires a specific scenario, Vethorin said. His voice was not as steady as before. Select one. Sarah Chun looked at the console. She thought for a moment. Can I see a comparison first? I want to see what kind of fortress I'm attacking before I pick which methods to use. The AI projected a hologram into the center of the room. It showed a branching tree of options so complex that several students cried out in confusion. Lines connected to more lines. Each line was a different way humans had learned to break a fortress. The Crick students' antennae were twitching wildly. This is just for fortress assault? Just for one type of battle? We take fortresses seriously, Sarah said. She was studying the hologram with calm interest. When your species spends most of its history fighting itself, you learn a lot about walls. Instructor Vethorin made a decision. He had spent 40 years challenging students. He had watched species after species fail against the simulation. Perhaps it was time for a different kind of test. Student Chun, he said, you will face the Academy's own fortress. The Citadel of Vethkara, the greatest defensive structure my people ever built. It has never fallen in simulation or in real life. Sarah looked at the hologram of the massive fortress. It was carved into a cliff. Weapons covered every surface. Shields surrounded it in layers. A kilometer of open ground separated it from any attacker. "Okay," she said. "What are its specifications? I need to see everything." She asked the question like a worker asking for a tool. Simple, practical, ready to begin. For the first time in 40 years of teaching, Instructor Vethoran felt something he did not expect. He felt afraid. Sarah Chun stood at the console while the AI loaded full information about the citadel of Vethkara. The hologram grew larger, showing every detail of the massive fortress. Weapons platforms covered the walls like scales on a fish. Shield generators hummed with power. The whole structure was carved deep into a mountain of solid rock. "Beautiful," Sarah said quietly. "Truly excellent defensive design." The Galaxian instructor watched her with all 6 eyes. He had expected fear, or at least worry. Instead, the human looked at his people's greatest fortress like an artist studying a painting. "The citadel held against the Morphean tide for 9 years, Vethoran said. There was pride in his clicking voice. It stopped a crick swarm for 7 years. In 800 years, no enemy has ever broken through its walls. Impressive history, Sarah agreed. She was still studying the hologram, her eyes moving from point to point. What about the ground around it? The terrain data, weather patterns, local resources, water supply. Why do you need weather patterns to attack a fortress? A Valkyrie student asked. Rain softens ground. Soft ground is easier to dig. Cold makes defenders tired. Heat makes them thirsty. Wind affects projectile accuracy. Sarah did not look away from the hologram. Weather is just another weapon if you know how to use it. The AI began displaying additional information. Terrain maps showed the kilometer of flat ground around the fortress. This was the killing zone. Any attacker would have to cross it while defenders fired from above. The ground was hard stone with no cover. Garrison size? Sarah asked. 5,000 soldiers, the AI responded. Standard Galaxian military composition. 2,000 heavy infantry. 1,000 artillery operators. 1,000 support personnel. 1,000 reserves. Food supplies? 8 months at current consumption rate. Water source? Underground spring. Natural formation. Cannot be cut off from outside. Ammunition? Manufacturing facility inside the fortress. Self-sustaining production. Sarah nodded slowly. The other students watched her, trying to understand what she was thinking. Her face showed nothing. She might have been reading a shopping list. This is a proper siege fortress, she finally said. Built by professionals who understood defensive warfare. It can survive anything thrown at it. It can outlast any attacker willing to wait. It can manufacture everything it needs to keep fighting. Then you admit it cannot be conquered? Vethoran asked. I admit it was built by very intelligent people. Sarah smiled slightly. But it was built to resist Galaxian military thinking. Your people fight in certain ways. This fortress was designed to defeat those ways. Let me show you something. She touched the console and the display changed. Now it showed not just the fortress, but also attack patterns. Arrows and lines indicated how previous attackers had tried to take the citadel. Every assault came from the front, Sarah observed. Direct charges across the killing ground. Brave soldiers running toward the walls while defenders fired down on them. That is the only approach, Vethoran said. The cliff prevents any other direction. The cliff prevents a ground approach from behind. It does not prevent everything. Sarah manipulated the display. Your weapons have maximum range. Your shields have power limits. Your soldiers need to sleep. Your ammunition, even self-manufactured, requires time to produce. Every strength has a weakness attached to it. What weakness do you see? The crick student asked. Its many eyes were all focused on the human. Your weapons can fire continuously for 45 seconds before they need to cool down. That cooling takes approximately 15 seconds. During those 15 seconds, the kill zone is not covered. 15 seconds is nothing, the Morphean said. No army can cross a kilometer in 15 seconds. No army needs to cross a kilometer in 15 seconds. Sarah's voice was patient, like a teacher explaining to young children. An army needs to cross 12 meters in 15 seconds. Then it digs in. Then it waits for the next cooling cycle. Then it crosses another 12 meters. Vethorin's mandibles clicked with confusion. You would advance 12 meters at a time? That would take forever. That would take approximately 11 hours to reach the wall base. Slow progress is still progress. Sarah looked at the instructor. Your fortress is designed to stop armies that want quick victory. It is not designed to stop an enemy that refuses to hurry. The Valkyrie student's crystal body was resonating with agitation. Your soldiers would sit in trenches for 11 hours while being fired upon? What creature would accept such conditions? Humans, Sarah said simply. We invented a type of warfare where soldiers lived in mud holes for years. They ate there. They slept there. They watched their friends die there. And they did not leave until the job was finished. We call it trench warfare. It was one of the most horrible experiences our species ever created. But it worked. She touched the console again. The display showed a comparison chart. On one side were human siege durations. On the other were siege durations from other species. The numbers were shocking. Most species counted sieges in days. A long siege might last a month. The Crick Swarm's 7-year siege of the Citadel was considered remarkable throughout the galaxy. Human siege records told a different story. The siege of Candia lasted 21 years. The siege of Ceuta lasted 26 years. The siege of Thessalonica lasted 8 years. The siege of Leningrad lasted nearly 3 years, with 900 days of continuous bombardment. Your people give up, Sarah said. She was not being insulting. She was simply stating a fact. When a siege becomes too long or too painful, other species decide the fortress is not worth the cost. They go home. They find another target. They accept that some walls cannot be broken. And humans? Vethorin asked. Humans sit outside the walls until someone dies. Either the defenders run out of food, or the attackers run out of patience. But we almost never run out of patience. Sarah's eyes were steady. We have a saying on Earth. Time is the fire in which we burn. But we have also learned to make time into a weapon. We will wait until the sun goes cold, if that is what victory requires. The classroom was silent. The students were not just impressed anymore. They were beginning to understand something terrible. Human siege warfare was not about strength. It was not about clever tactics or advanced weapons. It was about a willingness to suffer that other species could not match. You spoke of 11,000 years, the Morphean student said slowly. Did your people spend all that time fighting? Most of it, Sarah admitted. We had some peaceful periods. But mostly, yes. War after war after war. Each war taught us something new about how to hurt each other. Each lesson was written down, studied, and improved. Why? The Crick student's antennae were flat against its head, a sign of deep distress. Why would any species do this to itself? Sarah was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer. Because we had no one else to fight. We were alone on our planet. When we wanted something another group had, we took it by force. When we feared another group might take what we had, we attacked first. This went on for thousands of years before we developed other ways to solve problems. Other ways? Trade, diplomacy, laws. These came later. Much later. Sarah looked at the hologram of the Citadel. By the time we learned to talk instead of fight, we had already become very, very good at fighting. That knowledge does not disappear. It lives in our books, our schools, our military academies. Every new generation of humans learns what every previous generation discovered about war. She turned back to the console. So, when you ask me to attack a fortress, I have 11,000 years of experience to draw from. Not my personal experience, the experience of my entire species. Every siege ever fought, every wall ever broken, every fortress ever taken. I carry all of that knowledge into this simulation. Instructor Vethorin understood now why the galaxy's elder species had been so worried when humans discovered faster-than-light travel. It was not human strength or human technology that frightened them. It was human memory. A species that never forgot how to destroy. A species that wrote down every cruel lesson and passed it to their children. A species that had spent longer learning war than most civilizations had existed. "Begin the simulation," Sarah said. Her voice was calm, ready. "Let me show you what 11,000 years looks like." The hologram shifted. The battle was about to begin, and 31 students from 19 species watched in silence, wondering what kind of nightmare they were about to witness. The simulation began. Sarah Chun's forces appeared on the holographic display, a small army positioned 2 kilometers from the citadel of Vethkara. The fortress stood against the mountain, its weapons powered and ready, its shields glowing with energy. Every student in the room leaned forward. They expected the human to attack immediately. They expected to see some clever human trick, some devastating strategy that would smash through the ancient walls. Sarah did nothing. Her army sat in place. Soldiers set up tents. Engineers began marking ground. Supply officers counted equipment. The whole force behaved as if they were preparing for a camping trip rather than an assault on the most dangerous fortress in Galaxian history. "Begin assault," the AI prompted. "Enemy forces are in defensive positions. Attacking window is optimal." "Not yet," Sarah said. The Morphean student rippled with confusion. "The simulation has started. Your forces are exposed. The defenders can see everything you do. My forces are 2 kilometers away. That is outside effective weapons range. The defenders can see us, but they cannot hurt us." Sarah pointed to a slight dip in the terrain. "There, natural drainage basin. We camp there. You are going to camp?" Vethorin asked. His voice was flat with disbelief. "First rule of siege warfare. Never attack until you are ready. Never let your enemy know what ready looks like." Sarah's fingers moved across the console, issuing orders. "We have water access from the drainage. Southern exposure means warmth from the sun. Northern ridge blocks the wind. My soldiers will be comfortable." "Comfortable," the Velkari student repeated. "You want your soldiers to be comfortable before assaulting an impenetrable fortress. A siege is not a sprint. It is a marathon. Tired soldiers make mistakes. Comfortable soldiers fight longer." Sarah watched the hologram as her forces settled into position. The defenders expected us to attack immediately. Now they are watching us set up camp. They are confused. Confusion is the first weapon. The first hour passed. Sarah sent small groups toward the fortress. They moved carefully, staying at the edge of weapons range. They carried no weapons of their own. They just watched. "Reconnaissance," she explained when students asked. "I need to see exactly how the defenders respond. How fast do they aim? How long do they fire? When do they stop? What do they do when nothing happens?" The small groups approached from different angles. Each time, the fortress weapons activated, tracking the intruders with deadly precision. Each time, the humans stopped just outside range and simply observed. Pattern recognition, Sarah said. Your weapons take 3 seconds to acquire a target. They fire for 45 seconds maximum. They require 18 seconds to cool, not 15. The southern batteries are slower than the northern ones. The eastern wall has a blind spot where 2 coverage zones fail to overlap. How can you know all this from watching? The Crick student demanded. Because we have been studying how others fight since we first learned there were others. Sarah's voice was calm. Every species has patterns. Every defense has weaknesses. The job of a siege commander is to find those weaknesses before spending lives to test them. By the second hour, her reconnaissance was complete. Sarah had mapped every weapon emplacement, measured every response time, identified every coverage gap. She had not lost a single soldier. Then the digging began. Her engineers moved forward with shovels and picks. They stopped just inside the fortress weapons range and began to dig into the rocky ground. The fortress responded immediately. Plasma fire rained down on the exposed workers. The hologram showed explosions, fire, chaos. And then the firing stopped. The weapons needed to cool. Sarah's engineers emerged from shallow trenches they had somehow dug in 45 seconds. They were covered in dirt and rock dust. None of them were dead. Dig fast, hide fast, Sarah said. We trained for this. When the weapons fire, you are already underground. When the weapons rest, you dig deeper. Every cycle, the trench gets longer. Every hour, we get closer. The pattern repeated throughout the third hour. Fire, dig, fire, dig, fire, dig. The fortress weapons blazed constantly, pouring energy into the killing ground. Sarah's engineers kept working. This is insane, the Morphean student said. Your soldiers are being fired upon constantly. They are being fired at. They are not being hit. Sarah pointed to casualty numbers on the display. 0 deaths. 4 minor injuries. The defenders are spending ammunition faster than they can manufacture it. We are spending nothing but time. By hour 4, the first trench line was complete. It ran parallel to the fortress walls, 300 meters out. Soldiers moved through it freely, completely protected from above. Now we build forward, Sarah said. Approach trenches. Zigzag patterns to prevent enfilade fire. We will reach the wall base in approximately 7 more hours. 7 hours of digging under enemy fire? 7 hours of slow, careful progress that costs us nothing and costs them everything. Sarah's eyes were fixed on the hologram. Watch their ammunition counter. Watch their firing rate. They are panicking. They expected us to charge. They trained to fight charging enemies. They do not know how to fight enemies who refuse to charge. She was right. The fortress defenders were firing constantly, desperately, at enemies they could not hit. Their weapons heated and cooled and heated again. Their ammunition reserves dropped steadily. By hour 5, the defenders had used half their stored ammunition. By hour 6, Sarah's trenches had reached 500 meters from the wall. By hour 7, something new appeared on the display. A small group of 4 humans, far from the main trench line, moving toward the base of the cliff behind the fortress. What are they doing? Vethorin demanded. There is no approach from that direction. The cliff is sheer rock. The cliff is sheer rock now, Sarah agreed. But 400 years ago, when the fortress was being built, your ancestors had to deal with seasonal flooding. They built drainage tunnels to carry water away from the construction site. Those tunnels were sealed centuries ago. Sealed, not destroyed. There is a difference. Sarah's voice was very quiet. My engineers have been working on that seal for 2 hours while you watched the trenches. They will be inside the fortress perimeter within the next 30 minutes. The classroom erupted. Students shouted questions in a dozen languages. How had she known about the tunnels? How had she found them? How had she hidden an entire engineering team from the simulation's sensors? Construction records, Sarah said when the noise died down. Your people kept excellent documentation when they built the Citadel. Those records are in your historical database. The database is accessible to Academy students. She paused. Did no one think to read them before? No one had thought to read them. Why would they? The fortress had stood for 800 years. Everyone assumed its defenses were perfect. Your sensors are calibrated for assault detection, Sarah continued. They look for weapons, explosives, fast movement, aggressive behavior. My engineers moved slowly. They carried tools, not weapons. They acted like maintenance workers, not soldiers. Your sensors saw them and classified them as non-threats. You hacked our sensors? I did not touch your sensors. I just understood what they were looking for and made sure my people did not match those patterns. Sarah shrugged. Humans have been sneaking past guards for as long as we have been building walls. Sometimes the best way through a defense is to simply not look like an attack. At hour 8, the engineering team reached the fortress water supply. They planted charges and slipped away through the drainage tunnels, leaving behind enough explosive to shatter the underground system. At hour 9, Sarah's trenches reached the wall base. The fortress was surrounded. Its ammunition was low. Its water supply was compromised. Its defenders had been on high alert for 9 hours with no rest. Now, Sarah said, we talk. She activated communications and broadcast to the fortress on an open channel. Citadel of Vethkara, this is the attacking commander. You are surrounded. Your ammunition is at 42%. Your garrison has been on combat alert for 9 hours. I have demolition charges on your primary water cistern. If I detonate them, you will have no drinking water within 6 hours. The message went out. The simulation waited. You are offering them surrender? Veth-Orin asked. His voice was strange. I am offering them survival. Sarah's face showed no emotion. We have a tradition. Before the final assault, we give the defenders a chance to walk away. It saves lives on both sides. Some would call it mercy. I call it efficiency. The silence stretched. Every student watched the hologram, waiting for the fortress response. Then the AI spoke. Defensive garrison requests clarification of surrender terms. Full withdrawal with personal weapons. March out with full honors. Wounded will receive medical treatment. The garrison commander may keep their sidearm as recognition of a defense well conducted. Another pause. Defensive garrison has accepted terms. Fortress command structure transferred to attacking forces. Simulation complete. The final timer showed 9 hours and 43 minutes. The Academy record had been 37 hours. Sarah Chun had done it in less than 10, and she had done it without killing anyone at all. The teaching room was completely silent. 31 students sat frozen in their seats. They had just watched the impossible happen. The Citadel of Vethkara, unconquered for 800 years, had fallen in less than 10 hours to a human who never fired a single shot. Instructor Veth-Orin stood motionless at his podium. All 6 of his eyes were fixed on Sarah Chun, who was calmly shutting down her console like she had just finished a routine homework assignment. Explain, Veth-Orin finally said. His voice was barely a whisper. Which part? Sarah asked. All of it. Everything. How did you know about the drainage tunnels? How did you calculate their ammunition? How did you know they would surrender instead of fighting to the last soldier? Sarah turned to face the class. She looked tired but satisfied, like a worker at the end of a long day. The tunnels were in your historical database. When your ancestors built the citadel 4 centuries ago, they kept detailed construction records. Engineers always keep records. I spent 3 days reading them before this class. 3 days? The Valkyrie student asked. You studied our fortress for 3 days before the test? I studied every fortress in the Academy database. The citadel was one of 47. Sarah's voice was matter-of-fact. Humans have a saying. Know your enemy. We take it very seriously. Before we fight, we study. Before we study, we research. Before we research, we read everything we can find. And the ammunition calculation? Basic logistics. I counted their firing cycles during my reconnaissance phase. I measured the volume of each burst. I compared it to standard Galaxian military loadouts from your tactical manuals. Sarah paused. Those manuals were written 200 years ago. During your Reformation Wars, your military doctrine has not changed much since. Then, veterans' mandibles clicked with something that might have been shame. You read our tactical manuals. I read every species' tactical manuals. The Academy Library has excellent resources. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. Most students use the library to study for examinations. I used it to study for war. The Crick student raised several of its limbs. But the surrender. How did you know they would accept? Your species' reputation suggests you are merciless in battle. Why would defenders trust a human offer of mercy? This question made Sarah pause. Her expression changed, becoming something more serious, more sad. Because I gave them a way to survive with honor, she said quietly. That is the key to siege negotiations. A garrison that believes surrender means shame will fight to the last soldier. But a garrison that can surrender with dignity will often choose to live. How do you know this? Because my species learned it through terrible experience. Sarah walked to the center of the room where the hologram still showed the conquered fortress. 11,000 years of siege warfare taught us many lessons. The most important lesson was this. Enemies who have no hope become the most dangerous enemies of all. She touched the console and the display changed. Now it showed a burning city. Human soldiers moved through ruined streets. Bodies lay everywhere. This is from our history. A siege from one of our ancient wars. The attacking army gave no terms. They promised to kill everyone inside the walls. The defenders knew this. So they fought for every room, every hallway, every staircase. The attackers won eventually, but they lost more soldiers taking that one city than they had lost in all their previous battles combined. The burning city faded. Another image took its place. A different fortress, different soldiers, a different time. This is from a later war. Same situation. Defended city, attacking army. But this time, the attackers offered terms. Surrender now and live. The defenders accepted. The city fell without another death. The attacking army moved on to their next target with full strength. Sarah looked around the room at the alien faces watching her. Some showed fear. Some showed confusion. Some showed something that might have been understanding. We learned that mercy is not weakness. Mercy is efficiency. A living enemy who surrenders costs you nothing. A dead enemy who fights to the last costs you soldiers, time, resources. The mathematics of mercy is simple. Offering surrender terms is cheaper than slaughter. But your species is known for brutality, the Morphean student said. Its liquid body was swirling with agitation. The stories we have heard. The stories are true, Sarah admitted. We have done terrible things. We have burned cities. We have killed prisoners. We have committed acts so horrible that we invented special words for them. She paused. We call them war crimes. We created laws against them. International rules that every nation agreed to follow. You made rules for war? We made rules for everything. Rules for treatment of prisoners. Rules for protection of civilians. Rules for surrendering forces. Rules for wounded soldiers. Rules for medical personnel. Sarah's voice was very steady. We made these rules because we learned exactly how terrible we could be. We saw the worst of our nature, and we were horrified. The rules are not restraints imposed from outside. They are chains we put on ourselves. The room was silent. This was not what anyone had expected. They had expected a human warrior. Someone proud of their species' violence. Someone who celebrated destruction. Instead, they found someone who understood that violence and regretted it. You feel shame for your species' history? Beth Orn asked. I feel awareness, Sarah said. Shame without learning is useless. My people learned. We studied our mistakes. We wrote them down so future generations would not repeat them. Every human military officer is taught the rules of war before they are taught how to fight. Why? Because a soldier who only knows how to destroy is dangerous to everyone, including their own side. Sarah looked at the instructor with those strange forward-facing eyes. We learned that wars end. Eventually, the fighting stops. When it stops, you must live with what you did. If you committed atrocities, that weight never leaves you. If you fought with honor, you can rebuild. She waved her hand and the hologram changed again. Now it showed two groups of humans shaking hands. Behind them, a ruined city was being rebuilt. This is how we end wars now. Former enemies working together. Soldiers who tried to kill each other building houses side by side. This only happens when both sides fought with some measure of honor. When both sides can look at themselves and say, we did terrible things, but we did not become monsters. The Valkyrie student spoke slowly, his crystalline voice resonating with new understanding. You offered the fortress garrison honor because you wanted them to be able to live with their surrender. Yes, and because I wanted my soldiers to be able to live with their victory. Sarah shut down the hologram. A siege commander who slaughters a surrendered garrison creates soldiers who become comfortable with slaughter. Those soldiers carry that comfort into the next battle. And the next. Eventually, you have an army of monsters. I have seen what happens when such armies exist. I do not wish to create more of them. Instructor Veteran was quiet for a long moment. He had taught the mathematics of war for 40 years. Casualty ratios, resource allocation, strategic positioning, victory conditions. He had never taught the mathematics of mercy. Student Chun, he finally said, you have given this class much to consider. Your tactical approach was flawless. Your strategic vision was exceptional. But your words about honor and mercy. He paused, searching for the right translation. Your words suggest that humans fight not only to win, but to remain human while winning. Is this accurate? Sarah nodded slowly. We learned that anyone can become a monster. Violence changes people. Power corrupts. Victory at any cost eventually costs everything that matters. So we created rules to protect ourselves from ourselves. We fight to win, yes, but we also fight to remain the kind of species we can respect. And if the rules fail, if an enemy commits atrocities against you, then we face a terrible choice. Match their cruelty and become what we hate. Or hold to our rules and possibly lose. Sarah's face was hard now, showing the steel beneath the soft surface. Different humans have made different choices throughout our history. We are not a species of saints. We have monsters among us, just like every other species. The difference is that we recognize our monsters for what they are. We name them. We judge them. We try to stop them. Try. We do not always succeed, but we always try. Sarah looked at her classmates, at the alien faces watching her with new expressions. That is what 11,000 years of war taught us. Not just how to fight, how to stop fighting, how to make peace after the fighting ends, how to live with former enemies, how to rebuild what we destroyed. She gathered her materials and prepared to leave. The Citadel simulation tested my ability to win a battle, she said. I hope it also showed something more important. Winning a battle is easy. Winning a war is harder. Winning a peace that lasts is the hardest thing of all. Humans are still learning how to do it. But we are learning. She walked toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Instructor Vethorin. Your fortress was magnificent, by the way. Your ancestors were brilliant engineers. I meant no disrespect by defeating it. Then she was gone, leaving 31 students and one instructor to consider what they had learned about humanity. It was not what any of them had expected. The academy had a memorial garden where students could walk among plants from 100 different worlds. Trees that breathed nitrogen grew beside flowers that drank radiation. It was a place of peace in a school dedicated to war. Instructor Vethorin found Sarah Chum there after class ended. She was sitting beneath a tree that had been engineered to survive on 17 different planets. Its leaves were silver and its trunk was blue, and it made a soft humming sound when wind passed through its branches. May I join you? Vethorin asked. Sarah gestured to the bench beside her. It was designed for Galaxian anatomy, with supports for 4 arms, but she sat comfortably at one end while the instructor settled at the other. I have taught at this academy for 40 years, Vethorin said. I believed I understood war. You do understand war, Sarah replied. Galaxian military doctrine is sophisticated and professional. The Citadel was genuinely impressive. In a real siege, with real soldiers, real weather, real fatigue, it would have been much harder to take. But you would have taken it, eventually, yes. Sarah looked up at the silver leaves. Humans are very patient when we want something. Very creative. Very stubborn. If the tunnel trick had failed, I would have tried something else. If that failed, I would have tried another thing. We would have sat outside those walls for years if necessary. Vethorin's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. The other students are afraid of you now. Good. Good? Fear is not a good foundation for friendship. But it is an excellent starting point for respect. Sarah turned to face him. Her predator's eyes, both facing forward for tracking prey, held something old and tired. The galaxy heard stories about humanity. Death worlders. Persistence predators. Endless warriors. Those stories are true. But they are not the whole truth. What is the whole truth? The truth is that we are trying to change. Sarah picked up a fallen leaf, silver and delicate. For 11,000 years, our only enemies were each other. We got very good at killing ourselves. Now we have met other species. We need to learn a different way. You came to the academy to learn peace? I came to learn how others think about conflict, how they approach war, what they value, what they fear. Sarah turned the leaf over in her hands. Because if humans keep treating every problem the way we treated fortresses, we will burn the galaxy down without meaning to. Vethorin considered this. In 40 years of teaching, he had met warriors from many species. Some were proud. Some were ashamed. Some were simply professional, treating violence as a job to be done. He had never met someone who seemed so aware of their own danger. You believe humans are a threat to the galaxy? I believe we could be. Easily. Sarah's voice was calm, stating facts rather than making threats. We have 11,000 years of combat experience stored in our libraries. Every human child learns history, which means every human child learns war. We remember every siege, every battle, every clever trick that ever worked. That knowledge does not fade. It accumulates. This frightens you. It makes me careful. Sarah set down the leaf. There is a difference between fear and caution. Fear makes you weak. Caution makes you wise. Humans need wisdom now more than ever. We have power we never had before. Starships, energy weapons, the ability to reach other worlds. If we use that power the way our ancestors used their power, we will destroy everything we touch. So you study at an alien academy. You learn from species who are not human. I learned that there are other ways to solve problems, other ways to think about conflict, other values that matter. Sarah smiled slightly. My people spent so long fighting each other that we forgot there were other options. Now I am trying to remember. Vethorin was silent for a long moment. The tree hummed above them. Wind carried strange scents from alien flowers. You could have won the simulation in half the time, he finally said, if you had not offered surrender terms. If you had simply destroyed the water supply and waited for the garrison to die. Yes. Why did you not do this? Because that is not the species I want us to become. Sarah stood up, brushing silver dust from her uniform. We spent 11,000 years learning how to destroy. Maybe it is time to spend a few centuries learning when not to. She offered him a human gesture. Her hand extended, palm open, waiting. Vethorin had learned about this custom during his years at the academy. It was called a handshake. It meant trust. It meant peace. It meant we are not enemies. He reached out with one of his forearms and took her hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong for such a small creature. Will you continue at the academy? He asked. The Advanced Tactical Theory course covers diplomatic resolution and post-war reconstruction. I know. That is why I am here. Sarah released his hand. I want to learn everything the galaxy knows about making peace. Then I wanted to take that knowledge back to my people. I want to add it to our libraries, alongside all those siege records and battle plans and weapon specifications. You believe this will help? I believe it cannot hurt. Sarah looked out across the memorial garden, at the plants from 100 worlds growing together in harmony. Humans learn from experience. We write everything down. We pass our knowledge to the next generation. If we can learn 11,000 years of war, we can learn other things too. What things? Cooperation, diplomacy, patience, understanding. Sarah's voice was soft now, almost gentle. The skills that let different species share a garden instead of fighting over it. The wisdom that makes neighbors instead of enemies. Vethorin looked at the garden with new eyes. He had walked here many times over 40 years. He had never thought about what it represented. 100 species, growing together, sharing resources, making something beautiful instead of something deadly. It will take time, he said. Perhaps many generations. Humans are patient. That is one thing 11,000 years taught us. Sarah smiled again, and this time the expression seemed warm rather than threatening. We will wait as long as necessary. We will learn as much as required. And eventually, maybe, we will become the kind of species the galaxy does not need to fear. She turned to leave, walking along a path lined with flowers that changed color in the afternoon light. Student Chun, Vethorin called after her. She stopped and looked back. Today you broke every record in this academy's history. You defeated an unconquerable fortress. You showed tactical genius that will be studied for generations. The instructor paused, searching for the right words. But the lesson I will remember is not about siege warfare. It is about the choice you made at the end, the mercy you offered, the lives you saved. Sarah nodded slowly. That is the lesson I hope to teach. Why? Because the galaxy has enough destroyers. What it needs now is builders. Sarah raised one hand in farewell. I want to show them that humans can be both. That we can tear down walls when we must, but we can also choose not to. That our history of war does not have to be our future. Then she walked away through the memorial garden. A small figure from a distant world, carrying the weight of 11,000 years and the hope of something better. Instructor Vethoran watched her go. Tomorrow, he would revise his curriculum. He would add new lessons about the value of mercy, the importance of honor, the difference between winning a battle and winning a peace. The galaxy needed to understand humans, not as death worlders or persistence predators or endless warriors, but as something more complicated. A species that had mastered destruction and was now, slowly, painfully, trying to master something else. Restraint. The silver tree hummed in the wind. The alien flowers changed colors. And somewhere in the memorial garden, a human walked alone, carrying the past toward an uncertain future. She was one small person from one small planet, but she represented something larger. A species that was learning. A civilization that was changing. A people who had finally looked at what they had become and decided to become something different. It would take time. Perhaps centuries. Perhaps longer. But humans were patient. They had proven that today. And they had also proven something more important. They could choose mercy over destruction. Honor over slaughter. Peace over endless war. That choice, more than any weapon or tactic or strategy, was what made humanity truly dangerous. Because a species that could destroy anything but chose not to was far more powerful than a species that simply destroyed. The citadel of Vethkara had stood for 800 years. Sarah Chun had shown it could fall in hours. But she had also shown that the greatest victory was not destroying an enemy. It was turning them into a friend. That lesson would echo through the academy for generations to come. And maybe, just maybe, it would help build the future that Sarah Chun had described. A future where humans were builders instead of destroyers. A future worth fighting for. A future worth waiting for. However long it might take.